Hello all, this is Dswank. I am currently in Space Engineers, but I am going to be doing something a little different than normal. Um, this is the world that I've been building my fleet tender in, but there are some things that I wanted to talk about, like what would make a perfect video game for me. And I'm curious to see how many people would be interested in a similar type of game, and I'm going to discuss ideas and then throw some. Well, here's my take on it. Now, I've got rudimentary um, programming knowledge, so some of this, I mean, a lot of the mods and things at this point in things like Space Engineers, um, I haven't experienced. I don't know how they have it programmed. I'm not fully versed in the game engine. So, things that I say could be easy might be extremely difficult. So, now first off, things that Space Engineers has done right. Well, it's big. Scale is a big thing for me. Um, and you'll see my point on that later on. But the fact that I can build down like my own ship, and I will talk about some other things that I'd like to see later on. I'm not sure if the engine can take some of my suggestions, but yeah, we've got the ships, we've got the basic functionality of the ships. The AI that we have, the remote control blocks, they have pathing, they have things like that, which is wonderful. It's fantastic. But, ooh, excuse me. There is more to a game like this that I would enjoy. And it wouldn't take that much to shift from what we have already, other than maybe a complete rewrite. But we wouldn't lose any of the current functionality in what I'm looking at. You could still do like Sage and Aaron's their video series, or the XP Gamers video series very easily with my thought process. It wouldn't be that difficult. Um, it wouldn't. I mean, they're already doing it, so it's not going to be any more difficult than what they already have. Um, but yes, we have the building. We have Keen talking about AI, which their AI concept is something where you would have AIs building their own ships and fully functioning as independent entities. AIs that you could train to do specific things in game. All that, yes, that's great and wonderful, and actually would help do what I was looking at. With their AI concept, if they can pull it off, a lot of these things that my suggestions and concepts would be a whole lot easier. But like I said, we have basics of what Space Engineers is. It's a voxel-based building program with a rudimentary survival capability. It's not entirely good survival. I mean, we're missing a lot of things like foods and stuff like that that might be a little more minutia than what I'm looking for in this game. But I could very easily see it still working. Have even more so, and I will get to those ideas in a little bit. But yes, that's kind of, I mean, you go out, you mine, you construct, you build things. But it's lacking, as a lot of people on Steam will point out, end game content. Well, end game is what you do at the end of the game. Minecraft, I have played Minecraft since it came out. I have never been and fought an Ender Dragon. I've never gone to that area. I've done a lot of other stuff. I've had fun in it. But I've never fought an Ender Dragon. It's in-game content that I've never messed with. So, I mean, there's in-game content that Space Engineers could have. We just don't know what it's going to be. They're very secretive about what they're doing because they don't want to get burned again like they did on after burning everyone else with Minor Wars. And that's understandable. I hope Keen pulls it off because I really like Space Engineers visually and everything else. And I think that some of my thoughts on this might be completely out of left field for what they're looking for. So, my comment is we're going to use Space Engineers as a base and build onto it. So, I will be back once I get into our next game I'm going to talk about. Features of. And here we are. It's From the Depths. I wonder how many of you guessed this. It's another sandbox-like voxel game. You've got your own character. You've got this thing called a character sheet that gives you bonuses, buffs, things like that. It's not fully fleshed out, and it needs a lot of work. But both Space Engineers and From the Depths are considered in alpha. So, I'm not going to hold that against them. Okay. Now, if y'all haven't been watching my From the Depths series, you wouldn't know, but this game, there's a couple of big things about it. One, you've got this huge map. It's a real-time strategy where you design your own units. Now, it's great. You even have out into outer space in altitude, but your movement area is fairly... You don't have as much control. The map is a little finicky. I think it could be done better, but I mean excuse me, bugger. There's a lot of stuff they did right. You have your resource mining. Well, in my concept, or in the game that I'm arguing, you would have your multiple resources like you have in Space Engineers. You would build a mining ship, mining fleet. You could train the AI to continue to mine and just leave it in an area and say, mine, go harvest, and it slowly digs through all the stuff. Kind of like I have this fortress here, not really doing much. Okay, now over here, I'm going to go ahead and spawn this ship that will let me show off a couple other things I think Space Engineers needs to take a look at. Okay, their weapon systems. They're all modular. You can build up your weapon systems one block at a time. You can customize them. Everything about it. You've got your turrets you can customize. This is one of the greatest strengths of this game, is their weapon systems. But I also think that from the ground up, this game was intended as a real-time strategy, where Space Engineers was intended as a true sandbox experience. They didn't want weapons in there. They wanted people to come up with insane, random things. It was a playground. It wasn't intended to be a general consumer type game with in-game content, things like that. I think a lot of this is just people have been complaining and Keen's feature creep has kicked in. So, with that said, you've got your turrets, you've got all that, you've got thrusters, you've got control blocks, all this stuff, and you've got your AI that you can custom build. Wrong button, build. You build your ship out of these blocks. And some of these are locked for me currently, but There's a lot of stuff in here. Barrels. I mean, this is how you build your turrets. All these pieces. I would love something like this in Space Engineers. Because I wouldn't have to fight. I mean, it would kill a lot of mods. But I think it would be better. But the other problem is that the visual quality of the weapon systems wouldn't be on the same level as what King has already put out. But yeah, I really like From the Depths because it's a strategy game. I can pick my unit up and move it across the map. I've got my fleet down here. Granted, it's repairing itself. But okay, the whole fleet's moving. Yay! I'm going to go march across the map and do stuff. People might march across the map to me and do stuff. I don't know. That's what I liked about the game. It's strategy. Unfortunately, there's some features of it that aren't very well explained. You have to really play around to get. Flying vehicles. I have a horrible problem with flying vehicles in this because I had a Moray, which was a big flying battleship that I captured. I could never get it to take off. I'm going to be working on that later on in my From the Depths series. Building my own flying thing. Okay. Those two must be mine. That must be another resource node. So, but yeah, you can see that ring out there? Yeah, that's the spawned world. That's the edge of the world as we know it. And that's something I don't like about it, the scale of it. And I can fly out. Tab. And look, you've got this ring out there. And then you're off into the mysterious space. I mean, you've got the visual circle of what you can actually see. And then you've got this ring way out there. And I think altitude-wise, I am in space now. So, I mean, you can have space vessels, spaceships. But yeah, I mean, look how weird this has gotten visually. I mean, it's because it's loading and things like that. It just feels weird to me. So, yeah, you've got the real-time strategy, both of them. You build your own units, which I love. I love that concept. But it's in space. And the scale and vastness of Space Engineers is massive in comparison to this. And you may be asking, well, how would people be able to deal with that scale, thinking Space Engineers and strategy and seeing the whole map? Well, there's another game that I'm going to move to real quick that is an RTS and has that answered. And you may have guessed
Destroy enemy motherships.
Homeworld. Now, this game came out...
Mothership.
The original version of this is by far...
Production underway.
...older than any of the other games on the list that I'm going to be discussing.
Roger.
Interceptor complete.
Resources locked in. Copy. Resources locked in.
Interceptor
But,
complete.
See? You've got a relative... This is a large
Interceptor
stock
complete.
map. But I have seen bigger... I have played bigger maps
Interceptor complete.
using mods. The Complex mod is one of them. This dwarfs... I mean,
Interceptor
the Complex
complete.
mod had a map. And I really want to load that and mess around with it, but it'll take forever for me to download. And I want to get this video out. but they had a map that included the Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, the entire solar system in it. It was huge. And
Reporting.
you don't need that big of a view with
Reporting.
your
Resources downrange. Ready.
with the
Acknowledged.
modifications to space engineers that I was talking about. You just need the ability to have one button where you go out to map view. And you can build your fleet. You can hit M, shift,
Moving to destination.
and there. I'm moving my ships. And off they go. In this view, I can move them. Like
En route.
if they had two scales of command, you had, or three scales. You had your perspective as you were a player. You had your perspective
by.
like this,
Roger.
and you had your perspective here. And even to the point that I would love
Copy.
if there was a way in Space Engineers, or a game like Space Engineers, or From the Depths, that was in outer space. You just had a button that you, or a module you put on ships like this, that was your resource absorption thing, and you had to build storage containers so that your resources had a volume that they could carry. And did you build huge resources, or did you build small ones that could go quickly, fill up fast, and be back? Did you build the huge ones that would take forever to load, carry huge amount of resources, and were slow as get out, but when they arrived, you could build an entire fleet off of it? I mean, it's a balance. That kind of scale of
Roger.
thinking and strategy
Understood.
would be great. And you may be thinking, well, there's not many strategy games
Roger.
that let you control a single unit. You're right, but there is one, and I'll be right back with that. For those of y'all who are trying to figure out what I was going to be playing, or what my next game was going to be, this is Dungeon Keeper. Homeworld is not quite the oldest in this series. It came out in '99, and this came out in '97. But you had the strategy, and you had first-person shooter. Can I move? There we go. Okay, so I have the melee. I have two. Large. Three heals me. So yeah, I mean, and how do I get out of here? Oh well, I don't remember all the controls. Backstick, escape. Oh well, it doesn't really matter. But this game, I mean, it has first-person shooter perspective. You're controlling your individual units. And there's not many, I think there was like Iberian Sun or something that did this, which was a Command and Conquer, but not many games let you control your own units. I mean, and each one has each character has a different view, like the view of the world from their perspective is different, like flies. You can't really control flies because of how weird it's got this weird filter. But yeah. not well done because how old it is and the controls kind of suck. But that's my fault because I didn't map them correctly. Also, this game is very frustrating to try and record because I can't get the audio to go down in volume, which is frustrating. So hopefully you can hear me over the huzzy-dotty-huzz noises and stuff. So, now that I've discussed all this, I'm going to go to a game that's easier to record to continue my thoughts. Alright. I am going to finish my discussion now that that noising of Dungeon Keeper is gone. There are and you all may have realized that this is Mountain Blade Warband. Just appearances wise, it's the normal, but I have the diplomacy mod on it. Now you have some stuff that's just sort of meh-ish, that are options, things like that. Yeah, all of the actual diplomacy stuff that I'd be talking about would all be after I got a castle. But the diplomacy in all the games that I have mentioned so far is either non-existent or sucks quite a bit. And it's not a fault of the game, it's because diplomacy is very difficult to pull off correctly. And it actually works relatively well, relatively smoothly in Warband with the diplomacy mod on it. And I don't really have access to show them off. But anyway, things about this that are awesome and cool and work well. You can have cities. In the Star Wars Conquest, you have planets. You can have major hubs, major locations, which are owned and controlled by other factions that you can visit. No problem. And as long as you manage your diplomacy, you know what? I could play this hypothetical game that I'm throwing out there as a pirate smuggler or something like that. I could go and visit these other places and have a ship that I designed, I built, fly around, and you could do all this stuff because you're managing your diplomacy. You haven't pissed any of the big factions off. You've got your pirates, your looters that you have to be wary of, which would give you something to deal with. Just sort of your scrub faction. And you could do whatever you wanted. At this point, I mean, you could have one faction that you're building resources of. You could join a faction and build your own fleet. Or build your own ship and help them. They could join a faction and they give you orders. Or you could create your own faction like what From the Depths does. I mean, you can do that in this game. You build your own faction, or you can join one of the already established factions. It's there. The games exist with this. All the features that I am pointing out, games exist with. They just have not been combined into a single game. And that's what I would love. I mean, I think the skill sheet on this is by far closer to what you would need than what you have in From the Depths. And if you had your own faction, your own ship, your own design ship that you built, you could have it be a transport ship. You could basically be running, I guess, Eve. Eve would be a good example, where you design your own ship completely from scratch. At that point, you could have the mod. I mean, I know Space Engineers, the king doesn't want to put shields in and high sci-fi stuff. That's fine. You don't have to put high sci-fi stuff in there. But including a strategy element to it, because I love real-time strategy. And the Mountain Blade has sort of the action, but the action exploration roleplay to it. But what From the Depths and Space Engineers have, they have custom-made units that are yours. And I've got one more game I want to talk about before I end this. And I will do that in momentarily. It's going to take me a bit because I actually don't have an install. Ow. And I'm still getting over that bug I had a couple weeks ago. Blech. But yeah. I really didn't do anything here. But oh well. I will see you in the next part of this video. And we're in Planet Explorers, the game that I showed off yesterday, which, as it happens, I haven't actually recorded anything yet. But yes, I want to get my display, or the hypothetical game video taken care of first. But yes, the big thing about this that I would pull from here is the creation system. The fact that you can create anything in scale. I mean, you can... I think my recording thing is covering up my options for template. Yes. Gun. There we go. Okay. You've got all these things that you can put together and build all sorts of stuff. Okay, so do and put all these pieces together. You can have a really interesting weapon system. I'm curious to see all the bits and pieces that they've added. Laser muzzle. Okay. Those are the gun bits. Okay. No, let's come up here. But anyway, I'll do a more in-depth view later on. But the fact that you can build your gear, the sword, the shield, the gun, they've mentioned that they're looking at doing custom armor that you can build. And it's all voxel based. Come in here. You've got this voxel. This grid that you start out. And you can start with all sorts of shapes. And I'm trying to remember... okay, that's how you do it. But, oh, I got a grid. And I can put textures on this and paint it. And it can be made out of all sorts of materials. Diamonds. And it affects the quality of the device. I mean, in Space Engineers, imagine if you had your default gear, like the drill and everything that was made out of steel, and you had some sort of device on your in your suit that would be able to build a drill, just an iron drill, or anything like that. If you had access to the materials, it'd take a while and you'd have to actually just stand and do something. I'm not 100% sure how to do that. Like I said, this is ideal game for me. We could figure out the minutia later. But you build your gear. You can upgrade drills, make better hand tools, make custom guns for your character if you want it, all the way up to making custom, well, what we already do, which is vehicles, custom vehicles, which I had this tutorial of blocking it. But I mean, ooh, vehicle cockpit, motorbike seat. I mean, look at all this stuff. I mean, ooh. But there's the problem that I have with this game for this concept that I've been talking about is that the vehicles, everything that you're building is, you build it all except for some buildings, which don't save. You can build buildings out here, just placing grids down. And I haven't collected anything yet, so yeah. But if I could build a vehicle like you can in Space Engineers out here, or From the Depths, or any of those other games, build that here, I'd love it. I mean, there's an issue. There's several issues I can see with this. Just the scaling required to do it. You'd need a pretty hefty computer to run it. But still, I think that would make of the voxel creation capabilities of a lot of current sandboxes. Space Engineers, this, Planet Explorers, this here, From the Depths. You include movement commands similar to the way Homeworld controls it. You have the real-time strategy aspect that is the what From the Depths has, and it's in space, which space, yes. And you could also have ground-based strategy on these planets that they're adding. You invade the planet, you command your units, you jump down, you have custom weapon outfits for your tanks or for yourself. With this AI that they're adding, I mean, they have medieval engineers, they have barbarians, they have people that, they have peasants. You could go out recruit. You could build a society. There's a lot of potential in Space Engineers. Well, there's a lot of potential in games in general. I mean, this game right here has pretty much, if you could take the ground aspect of this game, Planet Explorers, and add it to Space Engineers, that would be amazing. It'd be almost impossible, too, with the engine, the graphics engine that both games have. But still, it would be amazing. I mean, oh, man, I don't know when I stopped recording there. But, it was after I started running around. But, yeah, this game is amazing. Space Engineers is amazing. You could combining the ground-based aspect of this, and, I mean, would be a pain with Space Engineers. But, I mean, look at that. That doesn't look, other than it's green with leaves and brown at the base, green up top and brown at the base. It's a tree, but it's an alien tree. Same with this one over here, that one over there. I mean, this is an alien world. It feels like an alien world, but it also feels like an alien world that people might be able to survive on. If you have the real-time strategy in this universe that's out there, include a diplomacy feature similar to what Mountain Blade has in their diplomacy. Let you go out and recruit randomly generated stats people to be on your command crew or command ships for you. Be the captains of ships. We're getting into some stuff that's overly complex micromanaging, like hiring individual crew and things like that, running an empire. We're getting into like civilization level complexity, and that's probably well beyond what people want, but I would love it. having civilization level complexity, managing an empire in full 3D where you can go down and design everything from the gun that your character has, the armor they wear, all the way up to the battleships that they're fighting over in orbit with, the landing craft, the tanks. I mean, the elements of all this exist already in some sense. It just needs to be combined, and I think one of the big problems is that the scale of this would be that most graphics engines couldn't handle it. Most computers would have issues handling it. But that doesn't mean that this is going to be impossible. I just think the game itself would be beyond everything else. I mean, it would be so far beyond other games, because the way, if you left it open as a sandbox, you could do anything. You could play the game as a trader. Not like Rebellion trader. Like, I have my own ship. I go out, I build, I have my own ship, and I trade with other people, other AI factions. I build or heck, you could be a company. You could just create a company and produce goods. You sell ships. You could have your own faction if you wanted. You could carve out your own little world, and the sense of scale of that game could be so great that you could play the same game for years. And you could have two games that you're playing for years that are completely different games. Because one, you're playing as a mercenary, trader, bounty hunter, whatever you want. And the other, you're playing as trying to capture or trying to conquer the boxed-in universe. You could have somebody that their whole goal was just finding a planet and taking control of planet. There's all sorts of things that could be possible, especially with the way Space Engineers and other voxel games handle stuff on the workshop. You could have requirements, you could have set things, and you could have community created things entering into the world. It wouldn't be that difficult. All they have to be is put on the workshop, and you'd have to have some sort of checksum to make sure that it meshes with your settings on your computer. Like, don't use things that have this many voxels or voxels. There's a lot of potential in it, and I would love to see it. But yeah, I could continue on ranting about this for hours, honestly. But I think I've pretty much said everything I wanted to say, and I will go ahead and end this here. If you liked my ideas, let me know. Hit like, hit subscribe, hit comments. I'm going to keep playing games until I find one of those, and I'll probably do, or not likes or subscribes, until I find a game that matches what I said. And then I will play the snot out of it and record it, because that's going to be awesome. But until then, and until the next episode, bye-bye.